and I've recorded the songs that I use on your list, and my understanding is they only have to record it once only. Is that correct?
Reproduction license, and therefore the law actually states that if you reproduce a work, then you actually report the reproduction.
Once, so I've got it on your list. How then do you decide to pay royalties to the performer? You don't know if I'm singing it once a week, for a year, or just once only?
Under the law actually allows you to sing it 1,000,000 times without ever having licensing.
Okay.
So that's the difference.
Reproduction of the words.
Now, what it doesn't allow you to do is actually to make multiple copies. And so what we ask is if you make, for instance, under our licensing, and part of this gets into the detail of how we actually do the calculations. But in actual fact, if you are projecting that up on the screen and you've created one digital file, you report that to us once. If you've printed that into a bulletin and there's 200 copies of a bulletin, you report that to us once. And the reason is because we know we weight the print differently to the way we weight the projection, and then we also weight it against the size of your congregation or your parish. So we do those calculations behind the scenes. So we know that your church, the size of it, we know the type of material, and then we actually do the calculations based on that. So our system is very, very accurate, and even to the likes of, we have all the major publishers who are very pleased with what we do, and have actually been tested out. We've actually had them test our reporting just to see how accurate it is, and
Thank you. Monica, can I just direct one question to you now from the registrations? The question from the registrations was about Willow Connections, and how, their question was about how they go about copying any of your print music now that it's not with Word of Life.
Okay. One thing I want to say is we haven't withdrawn from Word of Life. We've only withdrawn from the music copy licence. That is a very important distinction. Because a few people have asked me today, can I still put the lyrics up on our overhead? Can I still put the melody line in our news bulletin or our bulletin, what have you? The answer is yes. If you have a Word of Life licence, you can certainly do that. We've withdrawn from the music copy licence. So, and that was not an easy decision for us to make. We made that in consultation with our composers that we represent, which there are about 30. And I think it's important, if I may, Jen, just spend a moment to say why we've done that. Have we got time? No, I won't go on too much, but I'd like to please. Okay. The reason we withdrew is because we actually fundamentally don't believe in the actual process of that licence. And no offence to Mark, but the actual structure of the licence is one that we have trouble with and have struggled with. There's a pie, let's say, at a party, and there's 10 people who are going to take a piece of that pie this year, and they're paying an amount of money to do that, i.e. $128 if you're an average parish or thereabouts. Don't quote me on the figures, but it's in that vicinity, I think. And so I might have 10 pieces of the pie this year, i.e. I make 10 copies this year, and next year I'll pay another 128 copies, dollars, but this year I might actually have 30 people or 30 copies that the pie needs to be divided on. So in actual fact, the more people photocopy, the less the return to the actual composer. So it's unlike other licences that actually charge for copies made. This licence is a fixed rate, unlimited photocopying. And that's what we can't accept for the composers, because in actual fact, we know from our research that photocopying has become quite a prolific practice. And so the more it's photocopied, the less the return to composers.
Mark, would you like to respond to that at all? No? Okay. Thank you. Is there a question from this group? Just one.
I've got a few down here because there's a few schoolies down in this group. I suppose, sadly, particularly in primary schools, one thing we lack is full-time music staff, and if you get someone in your staff who is a musician and can do things like lead the music live at liturgical celebrations, then you hold on to them for dear life and make sure they never leave your school. Not every school's that lucky, and because of that, a lot of our schools rely on the music that they get through CDs and what have you, and there's As One Voice and As One Voice for Kids, for example, and different composers produce CDs and what have you. To make it simpler at the Mass, we then, or a lot of the RECs, compile that music they want in order on the one CD or on the iPod, so that you don't have the major disaster befall you at Mass and everything goes nice and smoothly. Is there any clarification on exactly, I suppose, a legal way of making that possible? Because
if the music that you're copying is within the ACOS repertoire, which As One Voice would be, I suppose. Yes? Then most schools in Australia have an ACOS ARIA licence for making recordings for educational purposes, and that licence in the future is going to enable you to use iPods. It doesn't at the moment, but you could reproduce it for your educational purposes under that licence. But it's only for the benefit of the students, but not for the parents or friends.
So when parents and friends then come to that liturgical celebration, what happens then?
Okay. They can come to the celebration, but they can't receive a recording. You can make a copy of the CD to listen to, or you can make a recording of a live performance of that music under the same license. But the parents can't
I think the question is about if they have a school mass, they have no musician, so they put it all onto one CD, all the songs for the mass, and they play the CD in the mass for the kids and everyone to sing along with it. And they're parents at that as well.
Well, they can make a CD, they can make a compilation recording for that purpose. If the school regards it as educational purposes, then they can do it under the license. And if you're inviting friends, it doesn't matter because it's, the recording has been made for the purpose of the students.
So if the priest is there, does that take it out of the education? You need your priest for that. You can't do it without the religious education.
Yes.
A school mass in the church, a school mass is occurring and it's happening in the church. A CD is played, words projected. Should it be one or two licenses shown and recorded, as in lyrics and music?
Behind closed doors, if you like. So if you're playing a CD, there's a reflection piece or something like that, and you're not actually reproducing anything, then it's allowed to be done. Do you know what I mean? You can play a song at a funeral as a reflection piece because the person, loved that song or whatever, and you don't need licensing to do it because it's within a church service, which is both public and private, if you like. Do you know what I mean? But if you were to do that on a public place, it would be a different story, wouldn't it? Play the CD, isn't it? I mean.
Your question was about copying the CD in the first place?
Yeah, it came from these ladies.
No, it was just about the using the CD.
I'm just saying. Okay. Yeah.
Which is fine.
So, to put it simply, it's either going to be a service of worship where you don't need an APRA license, or if it's a school, it's going to be covered if it's not actually a worship, but somehow related to the curriculum. It's either going to be an exception or it's covered by the APRA school license. So you don't have to worry about planning to the music.
I just want to put context around this, I guess, to you, Monica, because some members of our group were not aware of the recording. And so the question that came out of that, the recording, the number of times something's sung, and so it came out of the debate before. So are composers composing for business or for the church to assist in worship and praise?
I'm so glad someone's asked that, because when I do a copyright workshop, one of the big things that I talk about is the myth that Australian composers are wealthy. And if you have a conversation with a handful of composers that are here, without exposing their personal financial details, which I don't really am privy to them, I know that the royalty, people think royalties like thousands of dollars. One composer in the room earned, I think it was $4.18 last year for her works. Another composer in the room has never received any royalty for her works, although her work was used in the Wollongong Diocese significantly during World Youth Day, in the Rockhampton Diocese, in the Sydney Diocese, and has never received a royalty. So, is it a mission? Is it a service? Is it a commercial thing? It is most definitely a mission. It is most definitely a service. And I get quite passionate and sort of emotional about this because, you know, people think that composers and publishers, I mean, people think I'm riding on the back of some fantastically beautifully gold-gilded wave, I think. You know, I was telling someone earlier that it took me 12 and a half years to pay off Basil and Boris. 12 and a half years to pay off the first edition. So, you know, like, there's a huge myth out there that, you know, we're all basking in this fabulous thing called royalties. And it's just nonsense, really. I wish it was otherwise. It's definitely a ministry.
One here. With the Word of Life licence, what does the extension cover? We have a 4-digit code with an E on the end. Could you explain what that is?
Yes, I can. That was brought about quite a few years ago to try and make it a bit easier on churches. If you've got one parish priest administering to up to 4 churches. So in a lot of country areas you'll see a parish priest flying around on a Sunday or a Saturday night doing his best to accommodate his other mass centres. And they will apply for one licence with an E on it, which is slightly more as far as their licensing fee goes, but because the masses may not be set in those other out centres every week or whatever, it may be just periodical use, it's unfair, we sort of think, to be able to charge them a full-time licence. So what we decided to do back then was to try and help the church still do the right thing and pay for its licence, keep its records, all of those things, but to make it easier on them by not having, you know, 4 different licence numbers, one for each premises, which encompasses it so that it's just one licence number. It will also cover a school if the school is on the same grounds as the mother church. It will not cover any other schools within that parish.
Dan,
It will also cover people's homes.
Dan?
What is the difference between CCLI and Word of Life licences?
Too many to mention here. We don't have enough time.
I think we could have, is there some way we can answer that? Yeah.
And then Mark can correct me. We have a lyric licence. I understand Word of Life has a lyric and melody licence. So ours is just lyrics. Then we have the other licence, which is sheet music. And again, the lyric licence is an umbrella licence. You can do whatever you like underneath that because it's just lyrics and it's not copies based. It is congregation size based. The print music one is actually copies based, and again most churches usually sit within a category A and do a print rate and more than that, but it is going down that path of you're paying for every individual copy. Right. Sorry, we're going to say it's a license that goes up to 249, but we're keeping track of every copy.
I suppose the big difference, I guess, is the majority of the churches that we license are more of a conservative type church where they're not like big bands reproducing a lot of music. They're just primarily an organist or potentially a guitarist. So that's why our licenses are unlimited in that sort of respect. But Malcolm's right. The other thing that I think, are yours premises based, your licenses as well? Yeah, okay, so that's a difference as well. So I don't think you could meld the two in too many ways. Repertoire, well, there's lots of crossovers, isn't there? But there's also lots of non-crossovers, so specifics. So really, the two can't be melded. They're coming from, they're accommodating 2 different things, if you like. Let's put it like that way. They've been derived from, I guess, 2 different entities, and they've got different rules.
So you've got a school and a church, in other words, on the same premises. They're covered, your licence?
Providing they've got an extension on their licence, which makes them a parish licence, yes.
Parish licence, right? And yours?
We do school licensing, we do church licensing, and again, we like to hear what the story is, because it's no situation. No situation is ever the same. For instance, extension services, the way we do that, if there's one parish priest and it really is just him going out and speaking or ministering in 3 different locations on the one Sunday, that would be one licence. However, it's actually 3 separate churches who actually do 3 separate lots of, it really is 3 separate worship services. We treat that as a campus relationship, and we still license differently than just a standard 3 churches, and we do structure the cost down. So there are similar things, it's just how we go about doing it. We do denominational license, and I'm sure that that's the same for Word of Life. So there's all sorts of things that, yeah, it really is, boils down to talking with us, finding out what we do, and we do a lot of contemporary works, and so it really does finding out exactly what your needs are. If you ring us up, as I said, I'm not interested in selling a license, I'm interested in making sure that we serve you and meet your needs. So.
I just want to say one thing. If you've got a problem, or something you don't understand with either of the licensing, it doesn't matter, whether it's APRA or us or someone else, ring them or email them. I'm pointing you in the direction of email for one reason, and that is if you put your questions there, the questions are answered, you then print that off and show that to someone, because it's come from the horse's mouth. It's not come through you. Do you know what I'm saying?
Yes.
So that you've got that in writing, and that used to be the old way. You would write a letter, post it, the letter would be replied to, you'd have that in writing. Phone calls are great, but then you've got to then forward that information on to someone else, and sometimes you can't. That's exactly right, you can't get it that all in your head.
Well, thank you for all those questions. I know you've got millions more, but we need to finish the panel up. I'm just going to very quickly, and I think, Mark, what you finished with was just perfect. That please contact these agencies, the licensing agencies, because that's where you'll get the good information.
Not scary.
I'm just going to ask you all now to just thank the panel for all their wisdom and knowledge.
We're invited to come in the